Parliament's coming back. I don't really have anything to say about Parliament coming back beyond that it is. It is late November, and we're getting Parliament back after we suspended it in mid-August because, you know, how important it was to have an election at that moment. The point's been made. I'm not going to further flog the dead horse. The Prime Minister's views on the importance of having the election seem to change pretty radically after the results of the election became clear. I want to make a separate point. It has been, I mean, let's just do the math on this. You know, from August to September to then October to November, it's been basically 3 months since the kind of shutdown of Ottawa in one form or another began. And we're back, and it's interesting that those 3-month periods have been bookended by disasters. The federal election campaign, as you'll all recall, somewhat memorably began with the collapse of Afghanistan. And there was a really weird moment when the Prime Minister was announcing that the election had begun. Reminded me a little bit of that George W. Bush infamous moment of making a statement about terrorism and then going, "Now watch this drive."
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
It had that same kind of vibe to it because, like, the Prime Minister comes out and goes, "Oh yeah, the serious situation in Afghanistan. We're on it. We're coordinating with allies. Let's talk election and all the great things we're going to do for you if elected." The other side of the 3 months, we've got the situation in British Columbia, which remains very serious. We're still having major supply chain disruptions with fuel and food being in short supply in some areas, mostly due to panic buying instead of supply issues. But there's another wave of storms heading towards BC. And it occurred to me, if you take these two things and you kind of do a bit of a Vulcan mind meld with them both, you kind of start to get almost a meta-narrative of the problem we've been running into, which is the fact, and we've talked about this many times in these videos before, Canada is really slow at responding to the unexpected. And it is unusually on the nose to think that our government began an election on the day that a disaster requiring an emergency deployment by the Canadian forces began, and then when Parliament comes back after that election, there is an emergency deployment by the Canadian Armed Forces to another disaster underway. And I'm wondering if anyone is getting the message. You know, in British Columbia, there's been a lot of criticism over the speed of the government response, and a lot of questions being asked about why the emergency broadcasting system, what do they call it now? The Alert Ready system, we call it now in Canada, wasn't used. You know, the thing that sends out that horrible grinding noise, and it takes over your TV, your radio, or it'll send an emergency message onto your smartphone or tablet. BC hasn't used it. It reminded me of the columns I was writing years ago about how drawn out, pathetic, and slow Canada's efforts to even get the Alert Ready system in place actually had been. Guys, we have got to get better at this. We began an election when one disaster caught us by surprise. We bring Parliament back after that election while another disaster is catching us by surprise. Who the hell knows what's going to happen a month from now? We cannot afford business as usual anymore. But why do I have a feeling that over the next couple of weeks in Parliament, that is more or less exactly what we are going to get?